Hi, I'm Sara Barcan. I'm the Director of Housing Development at CEDAC, and I'm here today with my longtime colleague, Amy Schectman, the President and CEO of 2Life Communities. We're going to talk about how 2Life, which provides supportive housing to older adults, worked to keep their residents safe during the pandemic. And we're going to hear about how this path-breaking organization continues to innovate in the provision of housing and services to older adults, even during times of crisis. Amy, I think you own and operate about 1,500 units of affordable housing at multiple sites in Greater Boston. What are some of the specific things you did to protect your community during the pandemic?
Well, thank you for asking that, Sara, and for the amazing partnership we've enjoyed with CEDAC over the years. So I think all the things we did about COVID illustrate why aging in community is the fundamental way to age optimally. And I think our residents experienced that this year. And I'm really proud of what they experienced in this really difficult time. One of the important things we did early on was we hired an epidemiologist to work on our staff. That's not typically what we have on our staff, but she helped guide us through a lot of tough questions and sort through a lot of data that was coming at us that was scientific in nature. And we didn't have that skill set on board. So she's been great. And our goal in COVID was to keep as many people safe as we possibly could, recognizing we lived in a larger community. And so our efforts sort of come in 5 major categories, and I'll talk really briefly about each one. The first is to keep COVID out of the buildings, if we could. Second is to help our residents stay safe within their apartments so that they could remain inside and not having to encounter people with COVID. The third is to do everything to make our facilities themselves safe, all the equipment, all the elevators, etc. The fourth was to make sure no one was lost, no one was lonely, no one was forgotten, because this could be a time when people felt very much alone and isolated, and we weren't going to let that happen, and we didn't. So, and then the final piece was to advocate really hard to get vaccines for senior housing early in the process, and then to run clinics that effectively did that. So those are the big 5 categories. And really quickly, to keep COVID out of the building, we very early, a year ago, the second week in March, we closed our buildings to all outside visitors, except for essential visitors who help people with activities of daily living. And that was a way to just make sure the community spread wasn't spreading within our buildings. And more recently, about 6 months into it, we were able to add testing at the door to the routine so that for even the essential visitors, there's an at the door rapid antigen test, which will tell us whether someone's infected and allow us to prevent that from coming into the building. So that's what we did to keep the COVID out. We really wanted our residents to stay home if they could, because that was one way that they wouldn't encounter COVID. And to do that, we immediately started providing to everyone who wanted it free meals, free groceries, delivered right to their door upon request, free laundry. So you left your dirty laundry on your doorstep, we picked it up, returned it clean, and disinfecting and then delivering all mail and packages to people's doors. So that allowed people to not have to leave. And most didn't. And to recognize that that was a sacrifice for people, and yet it was keeping the community safe. We started a community heroes program where if you wanted to sign the pledge that you would stay in, and that in the event you had to go out, doctor's appointment or something that you couldn't avoid, that you would follow all of the safety protocols in addition to masking, hand sanitizing, all those things. So we had a lot of community heroes. Most of our residents became community heroes, and we had an artist design a beautiful plaque for their door just to recognize. And so every time they got a meal delivery, someone would say, "Oh, and thank you, you're a community hero." The third area, as I mentioned, is keeping the buildings themselves as safe as possible. So we immediately started a 4 times a day routine disinfecting and cleaning of every surface in every common area, elevator, lobby, the banisters, everything 4 times a day, completely clean. We also installed, I can't even count how many hand sanitizing stations all around the building. So everywhere you walk, there it was. And we also invested heavily in our HVAC, our heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, applying the principles the CDC laid out, which is dilution, filtration, and treatment. And those are really important. Day one, we stopped having inside air. We just started 100% outside air instead of remixing air, installed all sorts of new kind of filters. And then we bought this reverse ionization treatment system, which actually prevents droplets, infection droplets from glomming onto an air molecule and keeps that safe. So we did all of those things. Now, to make sure people were feeling heard, cared about, the first 2 weeks, we made sure we called every single resident. We have this massive spreadsheet. Who are you? What do you need? Do you have a daughter who's dropping off food, or do you need food? Do you want this, do that? And we actually asked, how often do you want to be called? Because at the beginning we were calling everybody every week. And I said, could you call me once a month or once every other week? It's a little bit much for me. But other people said, could you call me a little more often? I would like it every day. So we responded and we call people at the rate they want to be called, just to make sure they had everything they need. Also to help them sort through the massive data that's out there. You watch TV, you hear this, you hear that. Is that true? Is this true? Who knows? And so we had lots of information available so that people didn't have to sort through themselves. And I'm really proud that we just made sure that no one was lost. And, I do a lot of presentations at foundations to try and get money to support our work. And social service agencies often perceive me, they say, we don't know, there's all these seniors out there. We don't even know where they are. We don't know what they need. And I was like, we know where everybody is. We know what everybody needs. We didn't lose anybody. And that's really the nature of aging in community. We also, of course, wanted to keep people busy and entertained and engaged. And so lots of Zoom and streaming, and we actually created our own television station so that we could put videos of exercise classes and all sorts of things, lectures by professors, and sort of keeping people engaged. And we did a lot of concerts outside where people would go to their windows and hear the concert. We did hallway trivia contests where everyone sit in their doorway, which was more than 6 feet apart with masks. So we were constantly trying to do stuff to keep people engaged. And finally, of course, I think, played a pretty big role in all affordable housing joining together to try and get our residents higher up on the vaccine distribution list. And we succeeded. And we became part of the early distribution. And we ran vaccine clinics in all of our buildings. We went door to door so that people just had to be ready to get a shot. And we did a lot of PSAs. We had Russian, Chinese speaking doctors talking. We had our epidemiologists doing PSAs. I did PSAs. We called people. I did phone calls. We have a reverse 911 system. I could do that for every resident. And we really pushed the vaccines. And now I'm really proud to say that in our Brighton campus, our biggest and most diverse campus, 91% of the residents have been fully vaccinated. In Brown House in Brookline, 93%, Coleman House, 97%, Golda Meir House, 98%, and Shulman House, 99%. So we achieved really high levels of acceptance of the vaccine, and that's allowing us to be in programming again. Also, I don't know how to measure our success other than that over the course of the entire year, about 4.6% of our residents got COVID, not all of them really ill, but got COVID, compared to 8.1% of the Massachusetts population, and a higher percentage of both low income and older adults, but I couldn't find that information on their website. So I think we've been doing a pretty good job, and people feel protected and safe and loved, which is the bottom line.
Well, that is an incredible effort. And there's a reason why you all are one of the nationally recognized leaders in the senior housing space. And I think we know how devastating the impact of this pandemic has been on nursing home residents. And we know that one of the approaches that Two Life has always had is to provide services to residents to help them live at home rather than in a nursing home. So I think, important lesson for all of us from what's happened over the past year. There probably wasn't time for much else in your year, but I know you also have development projects underway. Were you able to keep those going? How were they impacted by the pandemic?
We kept everything going. There were some delays when regulatory authorities said we had to stop, but for the most part, we pushed forward on everything. We finished construction and opened a new building in Brookline, Brown House, with 62 affordable apartments in September. It became fully occupied by October. No surprise there. Even in the middle of COVID, well over 700 applicants for the 62 apartments. So you feel bad for the people that desperately were hoping to get in. And we also finished the design, permitting, and financing of two other major expansion projects. One is on the J.J. Carroll site, where we'll be demolishing 60 apartments and rebuilding 142 new apartments, all affordable, with a PACE center. PACE stands for Program for All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly, which is a mixture of insurance and actual direct healthcare provision on the site. We're very excited about the way we can integrate housing and healthcare there. And we're going to expand Golda Meir House, which is the place with the longest waiting list. It's about 8 or 9 year waiting list now. We're going to add 68 new apartments there. We're finished the design and we're going to completely modernize Coleman House, which is in Newton as well. And when we modernize, we do some important things. One, we make 100% of the units adaptable. What does that mean? They're not ADA units, but our feeling is that as someone ages, if frailty increases, it's enough of an indignity that you have to cope with that. You don't want to have to move to another apartment that's deemed accessible to you. So everything is built so that our maintenance guy can come in with a wrench screwdriver, whatever, one tool, and just take out the cabinets underneath the countertops, and everything becomes automatically adaptable. We, of course, spend a lot of time and money on 100% sustainability improvements. Everything we do is always enterprise green standards. And so we do that. And we continue to invest in the ground floor, the common areas, because we hope people will spend almost all their time engaging with other people. And believe me, once the pandemic's really done and people can reemerge, you're not going to see a minute that is not occupied with lots of activities. So we moved forward on all these. We also moved forward. We've got a research project going with the National Research Institute to document and prove beyond a shadow of a doubt what we all already know, that affordable housing with supports is far more cost effective than any other possible way to help people age in community and age optimally. So we kept that. We kept moving on some partnerships we've got with healthcare providers, so we can finally break those stupid silos that keep the two sides are trying to do the same thing, working together as opposed to working instead of parallel play. So we kept a lot of other things going, but I will say the biggest focus was on managing COVID, no question.
So when you think about the future of Two Life Community and where you're headed next, and hopefully with the vast majority of your residents vaccinated, it'll be possible, as you say, to return to much more communal experiences. But what are some of the lessons you're going to take with you, whether it's in the design of your buildings or activities or resources?
Sure.
How will that change your practices?
I think the lesson, I think, for our society is what we've known, but now everyone knows, which is that optimal aging requires aging in community, that being isolated, being alone has tremendous health consequences as well as mental health consequences. And I think there will be a recognition in society where there hasn't been before about the myth of people aging in place as some kind of ideal setting, when in fact we know in almost all cases that leads to loneliness and increased heart attacks, increased strokes, and twice the rate of dementia. compared to people living in community, and on average 5 years less life. So I think now people are going to be willing to hear it and able to hear it, and we're going to continue to push to make it accessible to everyone where it's not. And so that means both the affordable and catching that middle group. The other lesson I hope other people can learn is nonprofits need to be funded to have reserves so they can act quickly. At the beginning of COVID, because for the last 5 or 6 years, we have been working like crazy to build a rainy day fund at To Life Communities. When I came, we didn't have anything. And had that happened when we had nothing, we couldn't have responded in all the ways we responded. And government has been great, but been much slower. And so nonprofits are often treated like they should be stingied to. That's not a word, stingy, but I don't know what the right word is. And, we need to create reserve funds and emergency funds so people on the ground can act quickly in the case of a situation like we saw here. And, everybody's always worried, oh, well, you had $25 extra, more than your construction budget said, make sure we split it with you or we take it back. You know what? Let's give it to the nonprofits. Let's build up these reserves across the board. Because as I talked to colleagues who were asking me for what were we doing, in some cases, they didn't have the freedom to do that. And that's just wrong.
Well, your experience, as you've just described it to us, certainly demonstrates why it's so important to have those resources. As you say, it really enabled To Life to provide such a wide range of services to help keep your residents healthy and as happy as one could be under those circumstances. Right. And we so appreciate that reminder about the role that nonprofits play. The vital role that nonprofits play. Is there anything else you would like us to know?
Sure. Let's look ahead at some of the exciting things we're thinking about, if that's okay. First of all, we're going to continue to build affordable housing pipeline as fast as we can because our waiting list has about 6 or 7 people for every unit, and we turn over at 6% a year, and more people will die waiting to get in than will actually get in, and that's not right. So we're going to continue. We have an aggressive pipeline. We've got about 5 or 6 sites that we're working on right now. So we're going to do that. We're also going to tackle something different, which is people who earn a little bit too much to qualify for affordable housing, but not enough for what's in the market. Our market for aging in community is very, very high end, really serving extremely wealthy people. And everyone in the middle is, I would call it a market gap, but I think it's more like a market abyss. It's so gigantic. And the reason no one's doing it is it's hard to do because you can't charge enough money if you really want to hit the middle to provide all the services that we now provide because we can get philanthropy and government funds. But you can't get government funds or rely on philanthropy. So we've developed this new concept. We're about to start permitting our first one where it will rely on everyone volunteering in the community. Everyone who lives with us will actually significantly contribute such that we can reduce staff and overhead and offer the kind of aging in community. And we're very excited. We call that our Opus product. If you want, I can tell you why we call it Opus, but we're going to keep working. We're also going to, as I mentioned, work on breaking down these silly silos between housing and healthcare. We've got some partnerships with what's called SCO, Senior Care Options Insurers, and also the PACE that I mentioned before. We're building one PACE center. We're going to build another PACE center in 2 years. That's going to be really important. And finally, I don't think you can be alive in 2021 and not recognize that a priority absolutely has to be to become an anti-racist organization in every step of the way. Every cell in our organizational body has to be doing that. The thing we all know that the Federal Reserve Bank studied is the wealth gap is so enormous between people of color and people who are not of color. And the wealth gap most significantly affects older adults. When you think about it, the way people retire, the way people provide care for themselves as they age is the value of their home. and where we've discriminated and made it impossible for people, a lot of people, to own their own homes, that wealth gap affects how people age. And the people who don't own their own homes are the ones who prematurely end up in nursing homes simply because the government won't pay for any other housing, which is much more cost effective. And so it's a huge commitment that we have we are looking at soup to nuts, every single procedure and practice we have, and we need to get on board with colleagues and become truly an anti-racist organization. So that's a big priority for 2021 and beyond. And I guess the other thing I'd like you to know is CEDAC is such a critical part of the infrastructure of the system of building and sustaining affordable housing that we just want to say thank you. CEDAC, you guys are awesome. We need you. We appreciate you. Thank you for what you're doing.
Well, that's a wonderful note to end on, Amy. Thank you. And we so appreciate your time today and all of the work that Two Life Communities has done, not only to provide supportive housing and wonderful communities in which to age for really generations of our elders, but how much you teach all of us about how to provide housing and services, not only us at CEDAC, but I know on the national level as well. And we're really excited to see where your organization continues to go. Thank you.
Me too. Thanks.